Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have traded insults in an ill-tempered second presidential debate. A frosty start, Donald Trump defended his remarks about groping women by launching a blistering attack against Hillary Clinton and her husband.
If you look at Bill Clinton, far worse, minor words, and his was action. His was what he's done to women. There's never been anybody in the history of politics in this nation that's been so abusive to women.
Mrs. Clinton refused to respond directly about her husband, but said his remarks showed why Donald Trump could never be president.
Prior Republican nominees for president, I disagreed with them on politics, policies, principles, but I never questioned their fitness to serve. Donald Trump is different.
We'll be gauging reaction to the debate and looking at where the candidates now stand in the final weeks of the campaign. Also this lunchtime, the Brexit secretary is to make a statement to MPs amid growing cross-party pressure for a Commons vote on any deal. A widow calls for changes in the law after a psychotic man who'd previously faced knife and assault charges killed her husband.
Woman's Hour. This morning we have a Yorkshire housewife in the studio.
And the changing voice of Radio 4's Woman's Hour, which celebrates its 70th birthday.
In the South, guilty. The lorry driver who killed 4 people in a crash on the A34 when he was distracted by his mobile phone. And the hip-hop star from Sussex helping young people speak openly about mental illness.
Together.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. The second televised debate between the US presidential candidates Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump was a bitter affair, and today both camps have been claiming victory. During the debate, Mr. Trump attacked Mrs. Clinton's husband, saying there'd never been anyone in the history of politics who'd been so abusive to women. Mrs. Clinton refused to respond, but said a video of lewd comments by the billionaire showed everyone who he really was. Our Washington correspondent Gary O'Donoghue reports now on a night where personal insults hit a new low.
Another night when the stakes for Hillary Clinton were high, but even higher for her opponent. Donald Trump again facing questions about his treatment of women and his seeming willingness to force himself upon them. Before even a word was spoken, the tone was set.
You bragged that you have sexually assaulted women. Do you understand that?
No, I didn't say that at all. I don't think you understood what was said. This was locker room talk. I'm not proud of it. I apologize to my family. I apologize to the American people. Certainly, I'm not proud of it.
For the record, though, are you saying that what you said on that bus 11 years ago, that you did not actually kiss women without consent or grope women without consent?
I have great respect for women. Nobody has more respect for women than I do.
So for the record, you're saying you never did that?
I said things that, frankly, you hear these things are said. And I was embarrassed by it. But I have tremendous respect for women.
Have you ever done those things?
Women have respect for me. And I will tell you, no, I have not.
Locker room talk, he called it. She said it made him unfit to serve.
Prior Republican nominees for president, I disagreed with them on politics, policies, principles, but I never questioned their fitness to serve. Donald Trump is different. I said starting back in June that he was not fit to be president and commander-in-chief. And many Republicans and independents have said the same thing. What we all saw and heard on Friday was Donald talking about women, what he thinks about women, what he does to women, and he has said that the video doesn't represent who he is, but I think it's clear to anyone who heard it that it represents exactly who he is.
If you look at Bill Clinton, far worse, minor words, and his was action. His was what he's done to women. There's never been anybody in the history of politics in this nation that's been so abusive to women. So you can say any way you want to say it, but Bill Clinton was abusive to women. Hillary Clinton attacked those same women.
I am reminded of what my friend Michelle Obama advised us all. When they go low, you go high.
Repeatedly, Donald Trump called Hillary Clinton a liar. At one point, the devil.
People have been, their lives have been destroyed for doing 1/5 of what you've done. And it's a disgrace. And honestly, you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
He promised to get a special prosecutor to investigate her emails if he won the White House.
But when you talk about apology, I think the one that you should really be apologizing for, and the thing that you should be apologizing for, are the 33,000 emails that you deleted and that you acid washed. And then the 2 boxes of emails and other things last week that were taken from an office and are now missing. And I'll tell you what, I didn't think I'd say this, but I'm going to say it. And I hate to say it. But if I win, I am going to instruct my Attorney General to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation, because there has never been so many lies, so much deception. There has never been anything like it.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah. Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
At the end, a surreal moment.
Would either of you name one positive thing that you respect in one another?
Well, I certainly will. Look, I respect his children. His children are incredibly able and devoted, and I think that says a lot about Donald.
She's a fighter. I disagree with much of what she's fighting for. I do disagree with her judgment in many cases. But she does fight hard, and she doesn't quit, and she doesn't give up, and I consider that to be a very good trait.
This was the most petulant and bad-tempered debate there's been since they started doing these 50 years ago. The sheer visceral hatred these two have for one another was plain to see throughout. But despite all his problems, Donald Trump did deliver a better performance than last time around. It just might not be enough to erase the damage he's already done. Gary O'Donoghue, BBC News, in the spin room at the second presidential debate in Missouri.
So both sides say they won, but what does everyone else think? Some polls suggest that Mrs. Clinton came out on top as Donald Trump struggled to shake off criticism of his remarks about women. But surveys of undecided voters point to something less decisive. Richard Galpin reports.
The two candidates didn't even shake hands at the start of what's been described as one of the most brutal presidential debates of the modern era. So who won? In the immediate aftermath, campaign managers for each side inevitably called it for their own candidates. Amongst the Trump team, there was a sense of relief it hadn't been a disaster after the recent revelations of obscene comments he'd made about women.
Mr. Trump won the debate. She was defensive without sufficiently defending herself. And you saw a very resolute, very principled Donald Trump showing that he is ready to be president and commander-in-chief on day one.
As Hillary Clinton left Missouri with her husband, the consensus amongst most analysts was that she had failed to land the knockout blow on Donald Trump at a time when he was vulnerable. But she was quick to hit back on the issue of trustworthiness, accusing Mr. Trump of lying during the debate.
I was surprised by the absolute avalanche of falsehoods. I mean, I really find it almost unimaginable that someone can stand and just tell, a falsehood after a falsehood. And, do you all remember PolitiFact said that he was the most untruthful candidate they'd ever evaluated? And we sort of did the numbers. I think they said he was like 70% untruthful. And so I think he exceeded that percentage tonight.
The immediate opinion polls amongst those watching the debate indicate Hillary Clinton was the overall winner. But despite this, voters remain very divided.
I don't even think there was a winner, to be completely honest. I think it's almost exactly like the first debate. I kind of heard the exact same things. I'll say Trump did a better job of pointing out the things that the public wanted him to point out.
I think he has a lot of skills, and together they add up to be very formidable. But he's not the greatest debater. It's not his strength. But I thought he did well, and he landed some shots.
It's ridiculous, and I mean, he's just saying things that he shouldn't. I mean, if you want to become a president, you have to respect females, and if you're not able to do that, then how could you become a president?
But even if Donald Trump has done better than expected, will it be enough to win over the group of voters now regarded as key to winning the election?
If Donald Trump wants to try to change the trajectory, tonight was his best chance, I think, to begin to do that. And unfortunately, I don't think he did, because both he and Hillary are going after a very narrow sliver of voters right now, and that's the white college-educated voter, particularly white college-educated women. And I think the comments that we're seeing by Donald Trump is not going to do a lot to embolden this campaign, particularly with those voters.
And time is running out for Donald Trump, with the election just a month away. Although Hillary Clinton still does not have a commanding lead in the opinion polls. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
Well, let's go to Washington to our correspondent Barbara Plett-Usher. Barbara, we are 2 debates down, 1 to go. Where did last night leave both candidates, do you think?
I think Hillary Clinton probably in about the same place as before the debate, which is a sort of modest lead in the polls. Her performance wasn't bad. She was fluent in the policy issues. She was calm. She was scathing about that leaked video of vulgar comments by Donald Trump, but she didn't deal a devastating blow on that. And she also took some blows herself. Mr. Trump's position, I would say he's probably recovered somewhat. His campaign was in free fall before the debate. He meant to rescue it, and he came out fighting fiercely in order to do that. He dismissed the video as locker room banter, as you heard. He diverted attention from it to Bill Clinton's past sex scandals. He then launched this barrage of criticisms and attacks on Hillary Clinton. So I think he managed to change the conversation a bit. He has rallied the party base. He may have stopped or suspended the Republican congressional members from deserting him, but he still did not really reach out to undecided voters, especially women.
OK, Barbara, thank you. Well, the world was watching and tweeting as Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton went head-to-head. Christian Fraser has been looking at the reaction to the encounter on social media, and he's here. Christian.
Well, Rita, when the curtain falls and the debate is over, the real work begins, and not only in the spin room. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, between them, have over 20 million followers on Twitter. And as soon as this debate was over, they were quick out of the block. So let's take a quick look at the first tweets from Hillary Clinton. And this is the result of a snap poll from CNN taken from debate watchers, who you can see have her hands down the winner. Sometimes what they retweet is also quite revealing. Did this rattle her? She didn't seem rattled on the night, but this is from the Nobel laureate and New York Times columnist Paul Krugman. Let's be clear, a candidate for president promised to put his opponent in jail if he wins. Everything else, he says, is secondary. As for Donald Trump, well, he too declared himself the winner, but probably the most important message of the night, as far as his campaign is concerned, came from his pick for Vice President Mike Pence. Congrats to my running mate Donald Trump on a big debate win. Proud to stand with you. There were rumours swirling this weekend that Pence would walk, and this would appear to put those rumours to bed, at least for the time being. Well, aside from those, there are big moments from the debate getting plenty of reaction on social media, but also being talked about are 2 videos posted just before the candidates took to the stage.
The first came from the president himself, who was speaking at a fundraiser in Chicago. And yes, he's a Democrat, so obviously he supports Hillary Clinton. But can you remember any other presidential election where the incumbent gives a warning like this?
Demeaning women, degrading women, but also minorities, immigrants, people of other faiths, mocking the disabled, insulting our troops, insulting our veterans. That tells you a couple things. It tells you that he's insecure enough that he pumps himself up by putting other people down.
And if you think that's tough, then what about this? From The Godfather, Robert De Niro.
Colin Powell said it best. He's a national disaster. He's an embarrassment to this country. It makes me so angry that this country has gotten to this point, that this fool, this bozo, has wound up where he has.
But there are those who stand loyally in the Trump corner, including Nigel Farage. He was in St. Louis, Missouri last night and posted this shortly after the debate. Mr. Farage knows that mainstream commentators don't always get it right.
There are a large number of Americans not happy. You know, we saw the Sanders campaign too. A large number of Americans looking for genuine change in politics, and that ultimately is going to be Hillary's weakness.
So where do we stand right now? Let's take a quick look at the polling then. This is the Poll of Polls tracker. You can see that it has Hillary Clinton 4 ahead. You can see it's been an awful couple of weeks for Donald Trump there. So there's the collapse in his ratings. But then there is this slight uppick. Her big weakness really is among white working class people in America. And remember that Donald Trump has had dips before and closed them. Back here in June, July, he was down on 37%. Important to remember, though, that the US election is won not on national polling, but in the swing states. I've picked up 3 for you here. There's not been a US president since John F. Kennedy that has won the White House without first winning in Ohio. And that battle is tight at the moment. But up here in Pennsylvania, on average, they have him around 7 points behind. And he probably needs to win all of those and more besides to stand a chance. Brita.
Christian, thank you. The Brexit Secretary, David Davis, is to make a statement to MPs amid growing cross-party pressure for a Commons vote on the terms of Britain's withdrawal from the EU. Well, our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, is in Westminster for us. Norman, what's being proposed exactly, and could it effectively overturn the Brexit vote?
Well, the public have obviously had their say, but there is now, one senses, a growing head of steam building up behind the idea that Parliament too should have its say, not on Brexit, but on any final Brexit deal done by Mrs May. The argument being that the electorate voted to leave, but they didn't vote the terms on which we should leave, particularly if that involves leaving the single market, which wasn't in any of the parties' manifestos. So an unlikely coalition is now being pulled together by Ed Miliband, Nick Clegg, some former Tory ministers to try and give Parliament a final veto over the Brexit package. And this isn't pie in the sky stuff. The Labour Party are backing it, the Liberal Democrats are backing it. The former Conservative Attorney General, Dominic Grieve, said to me he thought Mrs May would have to allow a vote, and there's likely to be an emergency debate in the Commons on this issue. Now, Team May say not on your Nelly. The public have spoken. That is the end of the matter. There is not going to be a vote. There is another reason why Mrs May does not want to allow a vote, and that is, particularly if we've left the single market, she might lose it. And if she lost it, that would plunge the Brexit negotiations into chaos and would fuel suspicions MPs were simply trying to do in Brexit by the back door.
Norman, thank you. Norman Smith there. Well, following the Brexit vote, the British Retail Consortium has urged the government to put consumers first by protecting against a rise in import costs, which would drive up prices in the shops. Emma Simpson reports.
We import nearly half of what we eat, most of it like this fresh produce from the EU. Right now, there are no trade barriers, but retailers are worried that if we don't get the right Brexit deal, costs will rise, and so could prices for customers.
As we import goods into this country, coming from the EU or from other countries where there are trade deals, those at the moment are all tariff-free. And if, as part of the exit from the EU, we have new tariffs, then that will put upward pressure on prices for consumers.
Tariffs are a tax on goods at the border, but there are no tariffs for retailers when it comes to products arriving from within the EU, and they'd like to keep it that way.
Whether it's clothing or food, prices here in the high street have been falling these last few years. Great for us, but retailers say they've little wiggle room to absorb any potential new import taxes or tariffs. For instance, the average duty could be as high as 27% on meat imports. Clothing and footwear could attract tariffs of up to 16%. That's why retailers are warning that prices in the shops could rise.
But they also say Brexit could bring opportunities as well if we strike new trade deals with countries elsewhere. Experts say getting a good deal from our EU partners, though, won't be easy.
The government's in a difficult position. Certainly with trade, it's going to be quite difficult to keep prices low. They may have alternative policy options available to them, but on trade, they're going to just have to get out there, get on top of it as quickly as they can.
The government says it will be fighting hard to get the best deal for the UK, whatever that is. Retailers want them to focus on consumers and keeping prices low. Emma Simpson, BBC News.
The widow of a man stabbed to death in North London has demanded to know why knife and assault charges were dropped against his killer days before the attack. Dr. Euron Ensink was killed in the street last year. Our Home Affairs correspondent Danny Shaw is at the Old Bailey for us now. And Danny, the court heard from Dr. Ensink's widow. What did she have to say?
Yes, this was a very emotional statement made to the court by Nadia Ensink-Taish, Euron Ensink's widow. He was stabbed to death in December. Just a few days after the couple's baby daughter had been born. She said the single mindless act carried out by Femi Nandap, the killer, had left a massive void in her life. A husband, she said, was her soulmate, and the 11 days after her daughter's birth had been the happiest of their lives. She said knowing it might have been prevented made it harder to live with. Mental health homicides, because we know that Femi Nandap had a severe mental illness, keep happening again and again, she said. Why has there been no concerted action to deal with it? She called for an independent review into the case, asking these questions. Why was Nandap granted bail after an earlier offence? And why were the charges dropped just 6 days before the killing? Will those who made that decision in some way be held accountable? That is the question that she wants answered.
Danny, many thanks. The time is 21 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have traded insults in an ill-tempered second presidential debate.
If you look at Bill Clinton, far worse, minor words, and his was action. His was what he's done to women. There's never been anybody in the history of politics in this nation that's been so abusive to women.
Prior Republican nominees for president, I disagreed with them on politics, policies, principles, but I never questioned their fitness to serve. Donald Trump is different.
In South today, a full local weather forecast. Also, some good news for boat builders on the Isle of Wight as a yard lands a big new order for Thames ferries. And remember the Pronking Pool Harbour deer? Well, now a deer's been spotted swimming back across to Brownsea Island.
Now, the smartphone giant Samsung is hitting the headlines again, and again for all the wrong reasons. It was forced to issue a recall of its Galaxy Note 7 phone last month after complaints of faulty batteries catching fire. Now there are reports that it's had to stop production of the phone after claims that replacements were also starting to emit smoke. Our technology correspondent Rory Kethlen-Jones reports.
American teenager Abby Zeus thought her Samsung Galaxy Note 7 was safe. After all, it was a replacement phone after the first one was recalled. But then, she says, it caught fire in her hand.
Mom was like, don't use your phone. I'm like, why? If it explodes, it explodes. Whatever. Never did. And then I got the replacement one, and then it explodes.
It was a month ago that Samsung first recalled the Note 7 after reports that the battery kept exploding. But now several American users have had issues with replacement phones, including a passenger aboard a Southwest Airlines flight who said their phone started smoking. The phones are on display in British stores, though not available to buy until later this month. But Samsung says it's temporarily adjusting production. Every time Samsung thinks it's dealt with this, it seems more reports emerge of overheating phones. And the PR problem is no longer just about the one model. It seems the whole Samsung brand is being tarnished just as it faces stiffer competition in the high-end smartphone market. Last week, Google unveiled the first Android phones it had designed itself. Competition for Samsung, which is the biggest player in the Android market.
It's a reputational damage that is the biggest thing because Samsung's spent billions and billions of pounds over many years marketing and building up a trusted brand, and then you get exploding phones and stuff like that. It questions the reliability of all their products, but particularly the mobile handsets. Mobile phones make them a lot of money as well.
The Note 7 received rave reviews when it first came out. Now, with 3 US firms halting sales and UK retailers reviewing their options, its future looks uncertain. Rory Cutton-Jones, BBC News.
Leaked documents appear to show that Royal Bank of Scotland sought to profit by buying up assets cheaply from struggling businesses, which it claimed to be helping. The documents reveal bank staff could boost their bonuses by finding businesses which could be squeezed in what was described internally as a dash for cash. Well, our business correspondent Andy Verity is here. Andy, tell us a little bit more about what's in these leaked documents.
Well, Rita, these came to us via a whistleblower and a brilliant investigation by the news website BuzzFeed News, who passed us some of the fruits of their work. Now, what they relate to is small businesses after the global financial crisis. RBS ramped up its operation, putting small businesses and medium and large-sized businesses into what it called its turnaround division, the Global Restructuring Group, and it said that what it was doing was trying to help them. But these documents revealed that at the same time, it was looking to get hold of their properties if they got themselves into trouble, and that the division that was proposing to turn them around was collaborating with the property division. That's a clash of interests, at least perceived clash of interests, because one would want to buy it cheap, the other would want to sell it presumably high. The other thing they show is that they were definitely trying to make money for the bank in this turnaround division, for it to be a major contributor to the bank's bottom line, and that they weren't even requiring these properties to be fully marketed. So the small business customers feel aggrieved. RBS has said it doesn't recognise that it was deliberately causing the failure of small businesses.
Andy, thank you. And you can watch the full report on BBC Newsnight tonight. That's at 10:30 on BBC Two. Internet trolls who publish personal information about someone on the internet or encourage online harassment could be prosecuted in England and Wales under new guidelines from the Crown Prosecution Service. Anyone who incites a campaign of online harassment could face criminal charges. Keith Doyle reports.
Until recently, these words would have meant nothing to most people. Now, virtual mobbing, dogpiling, doxing, all forms of internet abuse could result in prosecution under the new guidelines. Kevin Healy has faced years of different types of online abuse. It all started when he began campaigning for causes associated with autism.
It's been absolutely horrific. I've had imposters, so I've had my Twitter account cloned, imposted, impersonated, people pretending to be me. I've had disability hate speech, which is classed as a hate crime. I've also had people, just tweet out the most horrific abuse about me. In reality, I don't think these guidelines will work. For me, it hasn't worked, and I can't see it working in the future.
Under the new guidelines, people who are grossly abusive, who bully or harass people online or incite others to do the same, can be prosecuted just as if they did it offline. The guidelines, which cover England and Wales, say police should also carefully consider the context of any alleged offences. The Crown Prosecution Service says they are designed to help police decide when antisocial internet use turns into illegal activity, and they are not to stifle free speech.
It's not just, you can't just be sort of mean, being mean or being nasty is fine in the same way as being mean and nasty in sort of offline is, but it's being grossly offensive or if it gets into a harassment type situation.
Last April, new laws in England and Wales tackling revenge porn were brought in. Over 200 people have been prosecuted since then, and people are now more aware of the laws. It's hoped by raising awareness of this type of internet crime, people will be more cautious online and not risk breaking the law in the first place. Keith Doyle, BBC News.
Now, for over 7 decades, BBC Radio 4's Woman's Hour has charted a social and political revolution in women's lives, covering everything from backstreet abortions and the introduction of the pill to the fight for the Equal Pay Act. The programme offended some early listeners with its make-up tips and male host, but now over 3.5 million people regularly tune in every week. Our arts correspondent David Silito looks back now at the last 70 years.
Woman's Hour. This morning we have a Yorkshire housewife in the studio, Mrs. Trent.
I want to talk to you about washing day.
It began 70 years ago. The first Woman's Hour featured an item encouraging women to wear some makeup. It was said, good for family morale. And the presenter was, of course, a man.
He was called Alan Ivimy, and he did not last for very long. Apparently the listeners found him patronising. Yes, they were not all that interested in how to powder their faces, but more interested in international politics, domestic politics, all of those kind of things. So we got it right in the end.
Today, an all-female panel was in front of a largely female audience celebrating this anniversary. And results of a new poll revealed just how much had improved in women's lives. But one question asked, which was the worst insult? Fat, boring, or stupid? The winner, if you can call it that, suggested that worries about appearance had actually got worse.
I'd say fat. Being called fat out of those three would be the worst.
I think fat would be quite a big one, because since you're a little girl, you're told to be skinny and to be blonde and to be all these things which women don't even match up to.
Much may have changed since the great strides made by the women's movement. But amongst the audience there was a keen awareness about what had and hadn't improved, and whether they would prefer life as a man or a woman.
Obviously that might be completely different if you lived in a different country or lived in a different part of the UK. I think overall I would prefer to be a male.
I think being a black woman, I'm proud to be who I am, so I would continue to be a black woman.
I would say female still. I'm proud for where we've come today, like thanks to all the suffragette movements and everything, we're at a good place now.
So, 70 years on, fashions, accents and issues have all evolved, but the reason the programme was necessary is perhaps as valid as ever. David Sillito, BBC News.
Let's take a look at the weather now. Here's Jay Wynn. Jay.
Thanks, Rita. It was a cold start to the day today. We saw temperatures lows -4 in a few parts of Scotland. One of our weather watchers catching the frost just melting there on the ground. But for some of us this morning, the skies were quite threatening. Some showers coming into the eastern side of the UK, whereas further west, many places saw this through this morning, some full streak holes in the cloud. A lovely start to the day here. And for many western areas through the rest of this week, that's where the best of the sunny spells are likely to be. Further east, still like to see a bit more in the way of cloud and some showers, but wherever you are this week, temperatures a couple of degrees below where they should be. Big picture sees an area of high pressure across Scandinavia. Winds go clockwise around that, so the air is coming in from the Baltic Sea, across the North Sea, picking up the moisture all the while and bringing in some showers to some central and eastern areas in particular. One or two of those showers could turn out to be on the heavy side towards Lincolnshire and East Anglia. But further west, actually, it's a lovely afternoon. Showers are few and far between. It's largely fine and dry, but head further east, a bit more cloud. They'll deliver some rain at times, could be some hail, some thunder mixed in with all of that, but head your way towards the north and west of the UK, and actually, it's a pretty decent afternoon. We've got some good spells of sunshine developing in Northern Ireland, and after that cold start to the north and the west of Scotland, got some sunshine, and temperatures should be up to around about 11 or 12 degrees. Through this evening, still some showers for a while in the Midlands, but they tend to fade their way back to those eastern coasts. Could be quite wet for a time down towards Kent. And the temperatures are falling away with clear skies for many. Major town cities into single figures, rural spots, once again, although it's the bottom end of single figures, so maybe even a bit below in some parts of Scotland. So another cold night on the cards, scraping the ice off the windscreens in the morning. And I think through tomorrow, the cold feel accentuated by the breeze, which will be quite noticeable. It's going to drag in a fair bit of cloud to northern and eastern areas with some showers once again. But I think the further south and west you go, it's a pretty reasonable day once again. 12 to 15 or 16 degrees. Those temperatures tempered once again by the breeze, which is still a factor through the middle of the week. If anything, the wind's a little bit stronger on Wednesday. Quite a bit of cloud on Wednesday. Outbreaks of rain to go with that. But some western fringes, once again, doing quite well, staying largely dry, and maybe even a little bit of sunshine. Now, the temperatures, again, 12 to 15 or so degrees. But again, you have to factor in that breeze, which will probably get even stronger towards the latter part of the week on Thursday. Still got the highs to the north of us, the lows to the south, trying to come in. But the overall effect is just squeeze those isobars together. A breezy day on Thursday. And with temperatures 11 to 14 degrees, it's going to feel quite chilly. And then there's going to be a lot of cloud and some rain to go with that as well. If you want to know more about those holes, those full streak holes in the cloud, well, you can head to the Weather Watchers website. Rita.
Thank you, Jay. Well, that's all from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Bye-bye.